Hey everyone, before we get to today's shows, I just want to ask you for your support. The UCAN Foundation has partnered with MoveOn.org to launch a petition that demands that Netflix and other reality shows put a disclaimer on the front of all unscripted shows. And that disclaimer says that all episodes are for entertainment purposes only, and any content can be edited, manipulated, and presented in any other way for storyline purposes. So please, if you can, check out the link in the description right here. Go add your name to support, and let's get this petition out to Netflix and start making some real change in the industry. Thank you for your support, and thank you for your signature. Now, let's enjoy the show. Callie was in a cult.
No, I remember I walked up and was walking up and he's like, "This is Callie." Because he had asked you guys as I'm walking up to sit down, had never met you guys before. I'm like, "Hey," he's like, "This is Callie. She was in a cult." Whole table comes to a halt.
And I'm like, wait, what? And I'm like, first of all, who says that? Who says that? Take a step back. Who leads with that when you're introducing someone new that's a friend of yours to people she hasn't ever met before? And so I'm like, my brain goes into, well, I have to know everything mode.
Yeah.
Are you going through life blind? This is Eyes Wide Open with Nick Thompson. On this podcast, we share knowledge and stories that build human connection while elevating stigmatized societal issues such as mental health, holistic wellness, culture, free speech, and more. All to ensure we show up in the world with our eyes wide open. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Eyes Wide Open. Before we get started, please like, subscribe, leave a review. All of those things help us with the show, grows the show, helps us in the algorithm. So thank you for that. Today is part 1 of 2 where I talk to Callie Ezell, and she is a Chicago-based abstract artist and the founder, entrepreneur with Mcmillan Street Art. And she's professionally a sales director. We recently got connected, and Callie spent 10 years of her life in a cult. So this is a little bit of my personal interest after meeting her and learning about what her experience was like in a cult. And for those of you who've been following my post Love is Blind journey, you will see that I have compared various elements of the production process to being part of a cult. And the reason I do that is because of my conversation with Callie, who we're going to talk to today. Because a lot of what she shared with me about her experience in this cult or in this program was very similar to what I experienced and my fellow cast members experience when you first arrive and participate in the Love is Blind experiment. So this was supposed to be a 1 episode coverage of her telling her story and sharing her experiences and her healing process, but there's just way too much to get into 1 episode. I didn't think we would go Joe Rogan here and go for 3 hours. So we split it up, and this is going to be part 1. In part 1, we're going to talk with Callie and understand a little bit about what led her to being recruited by this program / cult, what her first day and year really was like. Subsequently, some of the things that she experienced from a control perspective, what her life was like while she was living within this program. And then ultimately in part 1 here, we'll get to the moment she knew she had to leave. And part 2 is going to be focused on basically her hitting rock bottom and realizing what was happening and that she had to get out, but she didn't know how. So I hope that this is an eye-opening experience to some of the control mechanisms and some of the horrific practices that are happening in our real world, and that it can really happen to anyone. So before you pass judgment, before you make assumptions or think, hey, this could never happen to me, this story is something that's really important, I think, for everybody to hear. So I'm going to thank Callie for coming on, and I hope that this helps you go through life with your eyes wide open. Welcome to Eyes Wide Open. Today we have my friend Callie Ezell, who is a Chicago-based abstract artist and founder of Mcmillan Street Art. She's a sales director, and as I mentioned, we just recently met and became friends. So thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, how are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing good. We're doing better last time. Just a little fun fact. We tried recording a couple weeks ago and we spent 45 minutes on tech not working. And so
Yeah.
here we are doing it a little bit later, but that was a fun,
Earpods work.
that was a friendship building moment, wasn't it?
It was also 95 degrees that day. And so I'm like running around with all the cords and just sweat dripping down my face, 2 air conditioners on me. It was not cool or cute.
Yes. And I know a little bit about sweating and how uncomfortable that can be.
It was a bonding moment.
Yeah, for sure. So I like to start all of these the same, but actually before we do that, it's funny how we met. Do you mind? I just thought of this now. Do you mind if we tell the story of how we met?
Yes, please.
But wait,
tell.
let's first answer the question. What did you want to be when you were growing up, and how did you, how did that change to where you are now?
Quite a bit. When I was little, I remember this only because I did beauty pageants. I'm Southern, clearly. And I know one of the portions was you were walking out on stage and they asked what you wanted to be when you grew up. And I always used to say FBI agent. And wow. Yeah, I mean, I really love information. I love finding everything out. But the funny thing is my friends now who are like dating on the apps and things like that, they all say I should still be in the FBI, that I missed my calling, because I can find anyone on the internet and find anything out about them.
You can be a private investigator.
I heard that. I just don't want to sit in my car all day and watch a door.
You got to be more active.
I feel like that's a lot of the job. Yeah, or get like hit by some crazy person. So, in the middle of doing something they're not supposed to. So, yeah. That's
true. I feel like you put yourself at heavy risk doing that. And unless you have like a gun, which, I don't like guns, but it just seems, it seems like a recipe.
It really would be. And I'm not big enough to like defend myself depending on the person. So I'm just like, I'm a lover, not a fighter. I should probably not.
But what was the driving force behind FBI agent? Was it just you thought you'd get access to information that you wouldn't have otherwise?
I like to know stuff. I usually don't know anything because like I'm not Snoopy or anything like that. So stuff happens and I'm always like, what? Really? That's happening? And they're like, how do you not know? And I'm like, I don't know. Nobody tells me gossip. But like when it comes to like investigating things, I still buy these like not true crime, but like these investigative file games. You can get them at like Target or online.
Oh, I've played those. I have one. Like I have Murder at the Motel or something. Yeah.
The case files games. They're so good. And I will bring my friends over and they'll like drink wine and I'll end up just solving the case by myself because they are like 4 wines deep after I'm at the end of the game and I'm just over here like, I know who did it.
But I'll give you a little fun fact right now. Our little Target on Division that's not too far from either of us, they have a case file game and another like mystery game on clearance. So you might want to head over there and get yourself a deal.
I will. Immediately. Okay, so you're going to tell how we met.
Yeah, so wait, FBI agent, did that change?
Oh,
yeah.
I mean, it changed professionally because I don't do that now, but I do it privately for all my friends on the dating apps. So I'm a private FBI agent for dating.
That is terrifying.
Let me know if you need me.
I have to focus on dating again if that were, but I will keep you in mind. I'll keep you in mind.
Just all the viewers, if you guys need me, I'll charge you something fair.
There we go. Perfect. So how we met is super interesting. I don't know. So I can't remember. Was this the first day that so I was at a bar here on Division and I was walking back from the bathroom and a gentleman who's named Mike stopped me and he was like, oh, hey, you were on Love is Blind. I'm friends with Shane. And I was like, oh yeah.
I forgot he was friends with Shane. Yeah.
Yeah. They were friends. I think they used to work out together or something, if I remember correctly.
They did.
Yeah. And so he was like, oh, I'm friends with Shane. we just started chit chatting, ended up going down the street. I think this was the same day, but Mike and his wife, Courtney, and Callie, we all live within a mile probably of each other
Yeah.
on Division. And jokingly, like, we never leave Wicker Park. So I run into Mike and Courtney often. Yeah. So it might have been another time, but I actually think it was the first day. And so we go with Mike and Courtney to a bar further down the street, and we're sitting outside. It's nice out. It was early in the summer, maybe even still the late spring. And Mike's is direct the right word? Like, how would you describe Mike? You know him very well.
I do. One of my favorite people in the world also just drops the filter about halfway through Saturday. The filter's gone. So it's filterless is how I would describe Mike.
That's better than I was going to describe it. So we're sitting there. I'm talking to him and Courtney, his wife, Courtney, and Mike's like, is it cool if our friend Callie comes? I'm like, yeah, I don't care. And he's like, Callie was in a cult.
No, I remember I walked up and was walking up, and he's like, this is Callie. Because he had asked you guys as I'm walking up to sit down, had never met you guys before. I'm like, hey, he's like, this is Callie. She was in a cult. Whole table comes to a halt.
And I'm like, wait, what? And I'm like, first of all, who says that? Who says that? Take a step back. Who leads with that when you're introducing someone new that's a friend of yours to people she hasn't ever met before? And so I'm like, my brain goes into, well, I have to know everything mode.
Yeah.
and I've always been, a little, I hate to say fascinated, but like fascinated with cults. And I've been, I've enjoyed movies about cults. I've enjoyed documentaries about cults. And, I use the term enjoyed loosely. I'm always like enamored with it. And when you sat down and you were totally like comfortable, at least I asked, but you said you were fine talking about it. And I asked you a few questions, but, what you were telling me actually became somewhat of a headline of things that I've said in a few interviews where I've said, I met someone who was in a cult, and I started making comparisons and connections to like what happens when you go film a show like Love is Blind, where they just kind of strip away your identity, take away your power, and do it in a manner that is very controlling and very slow and methodical. So I asked you then, I was like, hey, if you ever feel like you want to talk about it, I would love if you want to come on my podcast, let me know. So here we are. You came around.
I did. It took a while to think about it because I still haven't. This is really the first time that I'm talking about it publicly. And so it was nerve wracking. I was set to do it a couple of years ago. And I think I knew I wasn't ready from the beginning. And I just started having panic attacks. We were thinking about, because there was a group of us who, stay in contact. We've all left. And we were like, let's do a podcast. Like, it is time to do this. And it came to, I think it was a week or two before we were all going to start. I had ordered the equipment, everything like that. Wow. And I was up for an entire night. I had 2 panic attacks that night. It was just really rough. And I was like, I can't do this to myself. So
was that your first experience with panic attacks?
No.
Okay.
They're not crazy frequent, but I had them. I had one when I was a teenager, just one, and then never had it again until I was in therapy for the, all the stuff. And in the first session, we talked about the cult. My therapist had to put me on the floor, put these rice sandbags over my eyes, my hands, and my legs. She was she had movement therapy training as well. I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong, but she had me lay down so that I could, just have pressure all over my body because it was so bad. Because I didn't originally go to therapy realizing I was in a cult. I went to therapy because there was just a lot of stuff going on. I had been out of the cult for probably 2-3 years at that point, and there were just like things coming up. Now I know where a lot of them stemmed from. Obviously, like as we're talking, she's just kind of looking at me, and she's like, "Does she know?" She does not know. This girl does not know she was in a cult. And I'm sure she was like, "Say more. Tell me more. Does that sound normal?" And I'm like, "Oh." And so that was the first day I actually said out loud the word cult, because I wouldn't use it for weeks.
You had suspected though, right? Because you had a friend, and again, this was like 2 or maybe more than 2 months ago now, but I'm trying to remember exactly. Didn't you have a friend that like reached out to you while you were still in saying, "Hey, I think you're," wow.
Yeah. So he sent me, I don't know if you want me to wait on this story, but essentially he sent me an article. He was a friend that had been in the program with me, and I was in my 3rd year of the program at that point, and he had left, and I'd stopped speaking to him, because really once somebody leaves, especially if they leave and they're not super loyal to, those people, that church, going off doing something like very big, for Jesus or, whatever, then they are ostracized essentially. And it's they talk about quiet quitting. It's like quiet ostracizing. So really, he left. People really wouldn't speak to him anymore. He started noticing no one was like talking to him, and everybody just sort of talked about him like he backslid, died, like whatever. It's like he's not living the right way anymore. And so he contacted me one day and was like, "Hey, Callie, look, it just hurts me so much. We were such good friends. I'm dating a great girl. I want to tell you about her. Like, my life is going really great." And at that moment, the guilt got me, and I was like, he's all of the things he's saying are making a point. Like, and I couldn't figure out a way to refuse it. So I called him and we chatted for a long time. It was very normal. And I was like, maybe he's still doing, this is my mind at the time. I was like, maybe he still is doing okay. Maybe I can just pray for him and he'll get as serious as he was when he was in the program again. Because he also seems like he's being a little too normal and like nonchalant, because there was this expectation of a way you were supposed to act, really intense. And so we talked, and at the end, he was like, "Hey, I want to send you something. I don't want you to be mad at me." He was like, "Please just, don't stop talking to me." He's like, "I just want to send you this. I think it's important." And it was a blog by a woman named Lisa Kerr. And this blog saved my life, eventually. And it was a blog called My Cult Life. And she was writing about her being in this program, because they had these programs in different states. And she started to literally lay out instance after instance after instance of things that happened at almost every location that were hyper controlling, extremely, in some situations, in some locations, very abusive, things that were wildly like oppressive for your mind, oppressive for women very specifically. And I read it and I just got so angry. I mean, I was immediately angry. But that night when I went to bed, I kept thinking about a couple of the instances over and over in my head. And it was the first time that I had been there that I started to have doubt. And that seed sort of turned into a tree eventually, and I was able to leave.
So, and I think that's a great time to go back to the beginning. Like, how did you discover the program or the cult, or did they discover you? How did you end up there in that first day?
Yeah. So the program, they literally had a recruitment, office. So it was lead like recruiter person, because they almost talked about it like they called it like an alternative to college, for people who wanted to be, an alternative to college for people who wanted to be world changers. So, and that was like the key phrase. They're like, "Do you want to be a world changer for God?" And so in my head.
Were you Christian at the time?
So I became a Christian my senior year of high school. I was never a churched person really growing up. I went to Baptist church here and there, but my family was not super religious in any way. I grew up in the rural South, grew up very poor. And when I was 15, my parents got divorced. So I was in between two homes, both very like extremely hardworking parents. We just didn't have a ton of resources. And so my mom ended up having to work overnights. I would, stay with friends a lot because my dad worked out of town a lot. So I was really in quite a vulnerable state, didn't have a lot of resources whatsoever in my life. My parents, really were focused on just supporting, me and
the basics,
the bare basics. And so then my mom started going to church, and it was, my parents' divorce was very tumultuous for, everybody involved. And I think it upended both of their lives in a big way. And so for her, she spent, a couple of years just trying to figure out who she was, because she'd been married since she was, I think, 20, and with a kid. And so, this was her first time, like, not being married as an adult person. And so she kind of did her thing for a couple of years and then started going to church the summer before my senior year. And I got involved in that church, and it was a very extreme church. They were known as, kind of the crazy church in town. And I had certainly never been, I hadn't really been a part of a, religious body before consistently. And so jumping into this church was wild. I mean, it's like hands raised, people playing, tambourines, jumping around, falling out, like all this kind of crazy stuff, at least to me at the time. And I think I was at a pretty broken place in my life at that point. I was just at a place where I had just been through the ringer. My whole world had exploded, and I didn't have the means that a lot of people, have, to be able to think about things like, going to college, having, all these things that you think about when you don't have to worry about like basic needs. And so
did you like lack a connection with your parents at this point, or?
I think that I was just really hurt. And it, my dad being out of town more, I mean, we're great. I'm wonderful with my parents now. We're great. It was just a really tough time. I think there was a separation there just because I was so hurt. And I think this church, although it was like a simple, small church, I think, if I'm being honest, I genuinely think they saw, me hurting and really wanted to help. And that was the way they knew how. And you see this in a lot of poorer communities. You see a lot of faith, and it's because there is not other things to hold on to. I grew up this way.
Yeah.
Yep. And so faith is a way to heal, to, have community. Community is huge for people who live in poverty and things like that. You have to have community to be able to survive. And so with all of that, I think I was just a perfect target for this group. I got invited to a summer camp, and they had a booth set up there. And
what was the summer camp? Was it just for like soon to be college or soon to be high school grads?
It was high school. If you've ever seen Jesus Camp, it's pretty much that, but for high schoolers.
Ah, okay. I actually, little known fact, had my own experiences in Jesus Camp when I went to, because I went to a Catholic school from 2nd grade through 8th grade, and there were a couple summers where I was at Jesus Camp. I still remember like some of the songs we would sing and how ridiculous they were. Like there was one about, anyway, it doesn't matter.
I was like, oh God, don't sing it. I'm scared I'll know it.
No. I'm not going to sing it. I'm going to spare everyone from that.
Oh, sometimes I'll hear a song like there's random songs that end up on the radio sometimes that are Christian songs from that time period, and they'll end up on a coffee shop one day. I'll be sitting there like working at a coffee shop or something, and it'll come on, and I'm like, oh, I gotta go to the bathroom.
Yeah,
just because I didn't expect it. I'm like, don't push that on me.
Right. I mean, geez. So you're at summer camp, Jesus summer
Yeah.
camp, and it's that's where they found you.
Yeah. So I mean, there's this kind of the essence of these places, all of these places, the thing that they all have in common is that they bring forward, I'm sorry if you guys hear my dog
Oh, it's
just
okay.
running around here. But the control measure comes from a lot of emotional manipulation. And so there's a lot of like high intensity music that's literally created in a way so that it pulls on people emotionally. Lights are brought down. Light shows are driven towards like impactful parts of the song. There's chords, keys, riffs, the amount, I mean, truly everything is calibrated so that it is tugging and pulling on every emotion. And so these teams of people, recruiters for the program, will sit outside of the main sanctuary, or they'll participate in some of the services.
Which totally normalizes it. Totally normalizes it.
Well, and it kind of makes them like superstars because you're a teenager and you're watching these people up on stage, like doing these things and, singing music and like being so passionate and, cool, and they're dressed cool and all this kind of stuff. And you're just like, I'm from the tiniest town in the world, have no money. And I'm like, wow, I think that is so cool. I want to be like that, and they have a purpose, and all of them are talking about their life before they came and how it's changed and how now they're whole and now they have a family here and how they, went through all of these terrible things and God has now made their life perfect and whole. And I was like, that has to be what I need. Like that for sure is it. There's no way around it.
Totally understandable to be in the space you were in and struggling in the way that you were to sort of get over, I guess, or grow from that. Just there they are to prey on you.
Yeah. And so talked to them after service. They talked to me about the program. I think the program cost. So what they would do is you had two options. You could pay it in full, or you could live with what's called a home opener. It's a family that opens their home up to kids coming to this program at this church. This church is huge. And I'd never heard of this town in Illinois before. I had never been to Illinois. I had been to Texas. That was as far as I had gone from Alabama growing up. So I wasn't well traveled. I wasn't well educated. And I just was like, I can't believe I'm doing this, but I've always wanted to get out of here. Like I've always wanted to like try and see if I can possibly make something out of my life. I don't want to live in this town for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
No shame to anybody that does. It just wasn't ever what I wanted. And so I was like, I've got to raise money. So I was like, I don't have money. I don't know what to do. And so they said I could come live with a family in the church if I could raise enough money, which I think it was like $5,000 or $6,000. This was 2003.
Wait, what was the full price of admission?
I think it was like $7,000 or something. I don't remember that exactly, but yeah, like $7,000.
A lot of money. And this was how many years ago?
2003. So this is 20 years ago. I was fresh out of high school. So yeah, it was wild. So I did all kinds of stuff to raise money. They allowed me to pay like half of the deposit or like a quarter or something up front. And then every quarter I had to make another quarter payment of what I owed. And so I think I was able to get like $2,000 raised.
Wow.
And ended up going. And so like, I think it was like September 2nd of 2003 or September 7th. I can't remember which one. I showed up and I was there. Yeah.
And what was it like when you got there? What was your first impressions and what happened?
When I got there, it was really interesting. I mean, I think the class initially was like 60 people because is
it a compound or are you just in a church in this town?
So it's this huge, well, there's a couple different things. So there's the huge, huge church. This church was so massive. There were two different sanctuaries. A school was attached to it. There was
I'm not going to lie. I am terrified. I know what church this is, and I hope I don't.
I think I know what church you think it is, but that's not the one. But they are, somewhat affiliated with them.
Right.
That one's way more like well known for a lot of bad reasons too. Anyway, so essentially you walk in and there's this orientation. The leader, the guy that like everybody knows, is standing there like really cool. Like everybody's dressed really cool. There's like this. It's so hard to explain to somebody who doesn't who hasn't seen all of this, but it's such an insulated world, the evangelical world. Everybody the style icons are all the same. And so all the like well-dressed people dress the same. And so it's just this very distinctive look. I could pick it out of a crowd like any day of the week. I know it immediately.
Is it suits? Is it dresses for women? What is it like?
It's kind of like, it's very European. It's very like, this is such a bad example. No, it's like Bono. It's just this look, this like very distinct look, and I'm sure it's changed now. And
perhaps it's like FBI, right, or the CIA.
Now I think it's a little more hipster these days. But yeah, it was a very distinctive look, and I immediately was like, oh God, I don't fit in. Like I don't like cargo pants. I think I remember, and a white shirt. I remember that day so wildly. I was like, all of my nerves were on the top of my skin. I had the Kate +8. I forget what her name was, but I had the spiky in the back hair and the short in the front, like the let me speak manager.
I cannot even imagine.
Good.
That's the Karen haircut. My barber has a sticker on he's at Floyd's. He has a sticker of a Karen, and she has that haircut.
It's bad. So embarrassing. I was like, oh God, what was I thinking?
Send us a picture. We'll flash it up here on the video.
Okay. I have it. I'm ashamed, but I do have it. And yeah, there were two other people that had come from the same church as me because we were all recruited. And so we had all kind of met up that day, and we're, going to start the program. I think both of them had been able to afford to live in the housing unit. So it's like you're saying, it's sort of like a compound. It's like these apartment buildings that the church owns, I guess. Yeah. And they let the students live there. You just have to pay extra to be able to live there. And so it's called I won't say it, but it's called, it's got an acronym, and it's this place where all these people, male students live on the back, female students live on the front. And, you have roommates. So everybody really kind of has a roommate in there. So, but I went to live with a home opener, and it was this couple who I actually really loved. They were such sweet people. They were, I think, in their late 70s, early 80s at the time, and they sort of became like little grandparents to me. But I was given a roommate at the time who, we were just extremely different. And I want to be really careful as I'm talking about her. She's actually had some severe medical stuff happen since then, and she's no longer able to like communicate or anything like that. So I don't want to say anything bad, but I was just put in a really rough situation where I was sharing a bunk bed with this stranger.
And that's okay. Sometimes people just aren't compatible roommates. I've had incompatible roommate, and like I still care about her. I love her. She's the best. Yeah.
I don't have, I wish nothing but the best, obviously, for her. But, she had grown up extremely, she had spent her whole life as a Christian. She had taken school at home. She grew up in a very large family. So our social interactions were very different. She did not have a car. They expected me to drive her everywhere. We were not allowed to have jobs, so I had no way to be able to do that. Really, I mean, I had no way.
They were really in control of where you live, what you can and can't do, because they would like hold your financial insecurities over your head. Is that fair, or am I assuming?
Well, I just think that it wasn't taken into consideration, very much. I mean, I had no money. The only money I was getting every week was If my dad could send me like $25 a week, he would send me $25 a week. And so my home owners did provide food for me, which was great, but like I had to have gas. I couldn't really go anywhere. I couldn't really do anything because I did not have any money, and they won't let you have a job. You're
And
not
what did
allowed
your
to work.
parents think about this? Sorry, what did your parents think about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think my parents were just, my mom was in a place, I won't speak for them. And I think they were just in a place where they were still dealing with just the upheaval of their life. They were checking on me and I was making it work. I was certainly not telling them anything negative because in my brain, I just had like, this was God showing me how to be humble, how to be, live humbly, like live in a, way where I wasn't just constantly thinking about things. And to be honest, I'd grown up poor.
Right.
So I wasn't like necessarily, I was like, this life's just always annoying.
Yeah.
If you don't ever have enough, it's like life's just, not
hard.
trying not to be complaining about it, but it's hard. And you just sort of get used to everything being hard. And I think I just had gotten used to like something annoying is always going to happen and you just kind of ignore it.
I think that's completely understandable. And I just want to tie the comparison back to me arriving at Love is Blind. Just based on what you said, just for your, so
I love this actually, this compare. I really do. I think it's fascinating.
Because it was alarming to me when you were first telling me some of this stuff, and a lot of that stuff I had no idea. But you were first telling me, I'm like, God, that is so similar. So what they do with us is you fly from Chicago into LA. They put you in buses of groups of 3, maybe 4, and you're not allowed to talk to each other. Okay. And it's obviously men and women are separate because of the nature of the show. I know you've watched it actually, I don't even think all my listeners have watched it anymore, but that was step 1, right? And then you get there and you're giving up your phone. So that's the only thing that you're giving up, that and access to the internet. So you get to this warehouse, which is actually the studio, and you're in this area that looks like a high school gymnasium, and you're all 15 men are sitting at separate tables, not allowed to talk to each other. They feed you lunch. Then, okay, it's time to give up your phone. You give up your phone. And this actually might be reversed. I think you give up your phone, then you get lunch. So it was maybe transactional. It was one way or the other, but it was very transactional. Still not allowed to talk. So then they bring in the creator of the show, Chris, and you're kind of like, oh, wow.
Yep.
He created all of this.
Yep.
Right. And
this is so weird.
Yeah. And he's a very charismatic guy. Right. Like, and I actually like, I obviously he and I will never speak again, but
not outside a court of law.
Right, not outside a court of law until the day that I get a union formed, and I'm just like, this is just because you couldn't treat people right. But anyway, I digress. And he comes in, and he's super charismatic. He's a cool, like, separate the stuff. Like, he's someone I would want to get a beer with, right?
Yeah.
Very, very creative, very interesting, very charismatic. Tells you how things are going to go. Everything's going to be great. Then it's, okay, now we're going to go through your bags. And they go through your bag and they take everything out, and they're checking for electronics. They're checking for pretty much anything they want. They didn't, I don't believe they took anything else out of mine, but other people, they took some items, and then they make you put it all back in your bag and like close it up again. So that's another control mechanism, right? Like, I make the mess, you clean it up kind of thing. And it's over the course of a few hours. And then it's, okay, now we're going to take your passports, because we need to hang on to those for if you go to Mexico, we'll keep them safe and make sure that you don't lose them or something doesn't stop you from going to Mexico. Okay, here's my passport. Then it's
nobody's touching my passport.
Right? Then it's like, we need your wallet. And so they take your wallet, your credit cards, any cash that you have. And my number one advice to anybody going on a reality show is shove some freaking cash in your sock or something, because that's the only thing you will have worth any kind of value. And so then they take that, and then all of a sudden you get shoved back into a van and taken to a hotel that's 20, 30 minutes away from where you'll be filming. And they take you, each person, up to their room, show them their room. And by the way, not a fancy hotel, not a spacious hotel. It was not much better. I mean, maybe it was like a Quality Inn, right? Like I wouldn't have picked that hotel for myself. And then you're sent in that room without a hotel key. And if you want to go to the pool, you want to go to the gym, you want any opportunity to get outside, which you didn't really get, you want food. And the phones don't work, by the way. You want food, you want some water, unless you're going to drink out of the faucet. You have to call your wrangler and they decide. And because there's 15 men in this hotel and they don't want us talking to each other, you have to get permission to go to the gym, get on a waiting list, and you get a time slot. Same if you go outside to the pool. You're hungry. What
happens if you're in your room and have a heart attack?
You die. That's really what happens. And it's crazy, right? It's crazy.
Does somebody come check on you? Like being in a room by yourself with no phone, no hotel phone?
The hotel phone, you could call it was like rigged. It was if you called out, it would get like rerouted or picked up or something by the front desk. But you could call your producer's phone. So you could do like the extension of the hotel, but that was it. However that was organized. And so you're sitting there in this room for 2 days. You get there Saturday, you're there all day Sunday by yourself. And then your Monday, you go and you do a little bit of filming. And then Tuesday was like the day where you started. You're basically trafficked from place to place to place without any individualization, without any identity, without any identification, without any cash, without any money. And
do you think the initial part, sorry to interrupt, do you think this initial part of like isolating you was part of, sorry if the church bells are going off.
Oh, no, it's fine.
Do you think this initial part was the isolation, like to get you like sort of in a place where you're kind of starting 100%. To panic, you're weaker, you're like sort of weakening in your mind, you're panicking for 2 days, then you're starting, and it's really kind of a start of that process of like the control 100%. Mechanism. We had 100%. Something similar, but keep going because this is crazy.
Well, I was
in a cult and my mouth is hanging open.
Well, that's why, and I know I didn't share all of this with you, but that's where I was like, when you told me how they took you there and they just kind of like, you didn't have any money and you were kind of, and when you did get money, you were making a couple dollars to do like a whole day work. And then you had your responsibilities like cleaning the church. And I'm just sitting there and I'm like, this is crazy because it's like, they strip away your individuality. They strip away your identification. They strip away any means of you to leave and say that you're done and say, they're just in complete control of you. And then they traffic you back and forth. And it got to the point where, and I've shared this before, but like on Danielle and my wedding day, after we thought we were done filming, right?
Yeah.
We wanted to cut the cake. And we were like, did I tell you? Yeah. I'm like, can we cut the cake? We like went and found our producer to find out if we could cut the cake because we were that like unsure of what we were allowed to do and not allowed to do. And, it just took me even a year ago, it took me pretty much until I started the foundation and spoke out about this last April. It took me that long to really be like, this wasn't right. Like I was scared. I was scared of the contracts. I was scared of these unenforceable NDAs. I was terrified of getting fined all this money to a big production company. I was terrified of like ruining this relationship that to me, this relationship was it was like almost important to keep because you become almost, and they do that. They make you feel like they're doing you a favor. And that's the part where I was like, they did me no fucking favors. In fact, they did me the opposite of favors because I was fine and I was happy before any of this. And they took away and stripped away so much of my confidence. And it was actually a conversation I had with one of the cameramen that also triggered this whole thought process. I ran into earlier this spring, like early in the spring, maybe March, I ran into one of the cameramen from the show. And I didn't recognize him, right? Because he wasn't one of our cameramen as a couple. He was just a general cameraman, and he had filled in a day for us. And he came up and said hi. I said, hey. And then, I got coffee with him maybe a week later. And he said to me, he's like, and he didn't mean any ill intent. He was just, I had, when I was filming you guys, like there was just this like super confident, knows what he wants, can articulate, communicate. And he's like, then when I saw you at that coffee shop, it's like, it seemed like all that confidence was gone. And that was like a trigger for me to be like, yeah, it isn't there anymore, because the whole process, the whole thing made me feel irrelevant and made me feel like my experiences and my feelings and my sadness and my trauma that came out of this was just invalid, because you signed up for this. You get all these followers and you owe us for that. And by the way, if you want to go on another show, you better shut the fuck up. That's basically like the mentality of it, right? So those comparisons, when you tell that story, like they're so similar. And I'm not comparing my situation to yours. We were in completely different situation, but the control mechanisms.
Here's the thing: the methods for control are universal, and that's one of the reasons.
By the way, they're
ancient. Sleep deprivation. Isolation. I mean, look at anything that is a controlling entity, a controlling organization. They utilize these things. The two that we had in the program, and every time you talk about it, I see the similarities myself. This is not like, it's not the Pain Olympics. It's one of those things. I mean, it's really what happens, and I think what I've realized through all of this is that, I was in a cult. It's an extreme measure of being controlled in your life. Absolutely. But it really translates to people. And it translates to people because, inevitably you're going to end up in something that in some way, whether large, small, extreme or non, you're going to want to recognize like when some of these things are happening, and when they are, questions need to happen immediately. And if that's something that's happening in a relationship at work, in a religious organization, on, reality TV, whatever it is, get the fuck out,
Right. And I think it happens at jobs a lot too, where they hold you 100%. Hostage in these despicable environment and these, I feel like I'm like doing a Trump hand emotion right now. I'm so glad it's not on camera. Like these despicable, there's these despicable actions. They're disgusting, believe me. But no, they're conducting these sort of tactics on you in your everyday work life, because they don't want you to quit. They don't want you to think you have other options, and they want to control you.
Yeah. There were two things they really did to us in the beginning that were, I think, the two things. And I think the first one, I remember the guy telling us, this is going to break you. And it's going to break you for God, and it's going to lead you to like a place. So if you've ever watched any of those documentaries on those things called hell houses, where they do these insanely elaborate haunted houses, that was the first like real mission of my first year. So I get there, there's the ceremony, the ring ceremony, which I'll talk about in a minute because that's insane. I should have. If that were to happen today, I'd be like, what? I would stand up and yell, what the fuck are you guys doing? Like, is this for real? This is insane. You guys are nuts. But I wasn't, and I didn't. But I'll tell you about that in a minute. So we did this hell house. It was, again, I won't say the name, but it's huge. When I say massive, I think there was something like 50-something thousand people go through this every year, and it lasts for like a month, if I remember correctly.
All part of the same program or call?
Oh yeah. So our whole program puts this on because there's like a couple hundred, like 100 to 200 or something like that of us. Some volunteers come from the church that's attached to this program, and it's huge. When I say they filled up like a 15,000 square foot warehouse, front to back. It was insane. It's so huge. It's an old warehouse, and front to back, it's this. So first thing is we build it. And then you start to get separated out onto teams. And so they start to ask, like, we're
Do they
first
position
years.
it as a game? Is it like a game or?
It's a way to win souls for Christ. It's the most intense thing that'll ever be done. But really, you can kind of see that they just think this is so cool. Like, they think this is the coolest thing. It's like, you know, they think it's the most, like, insane. Like, we do everything with excellence. And I'm just, like, it's so cringy looking back on it. But
do you think they believe it, or do you think they know they're controlling you using this language, using the Hell House?
They know it breaks you down because they mentioned it. They're like, this will break you completely. And the thing about it was they would have us there some mornings at 6 a.m. and we weren't leaving until like sometimes 2 and 3 a.m. So some nights we were getting like, I mean, and that wasn't every night. Like sometimes I would leave at 10. You know, I think we got Sundays at least mostly off to go to church because we had to serve at church. But you were working 7 days a week for that 3 or 4 weeks. And I remember I paper machéed a cave. Like there was this cave that was like, had an 8-foot opening and I was sitting on top of chicken wire, like paper macheing some cave. And they were constantly like coming and talking, you know, about these inspiring things and how we're doing every single sheet of paper mache for God. But the really messed up part about this that I think screwed with me really bad was, and I look back on this now and I'm just mortified and horrified that this happened. You know, there were different scenes that you walked through and each scene depicted something different. And, you know, one was an abortion scene. One was a car crash DUI scene. One was a, you know, suicide, or unaliving scene. And, you know, it's first of all, that's so messed up. Again, it's the emotional manipulation. It's always the emotional manipulation because otherwise for the love of God, don't reason with them, manipulate them emotionally. It's easier.
Right.
And so
because they don't have reason. Reason's not on their side.
No. And so the easiest thing to do is to just screw with people. And that's what this does. I mean, imagine having lost somebody to one of these things. Imagine having to have made the decision, you know, however you feel about it one way or the other, you know, abortion is a life-altering decision, you know, and that it can be a really difficult decision. And imagine walking through there and just being depicted in the just most monstrous way. And, you know, seeing these people, you know, the devil comes out and is like, they deserved it when the DUI, they brought in a real car and they had a tree in there. I mean, it was very elaborate. It was insane.
Holy shit. So they were like, someone playing the devil, look at this car crash, don't ever drink. Oh my God. There
were latex prosthetics on. I mean, it was very elaborate. It was crazy, but it was, you know.
So I thought you were basically, when you said Hell House, I thought you were like exaggerating or using hyperbole, but this sounds like a literal fucking Hell House.
No, it was actual hell. And they started announcing the scenes and they were like, if you've dealt with any of these things, we want you to come tomorrow and talk to us. And so there's a group of
I haven't dealt with any of them. I'm good.
Oh, I didn't know any better and I didn't really understand the context. So I went back. They had said, you know, if you had dealt with like self-hate, like, you know, depression, things like that. So I did, and they asked me to tell them about it. And it's a group of like 3 or 4 of the staff members, grown adults. And I'm telling them how, like, I have just really, you know, it's been hard for me, like, to not, you know, just all these things, you know, how I dealt with just depression and sadness and how it had been, you know, really difficult the, you know, last few years and all this kind of stuff. So they put me in the suicide scene, the unaliving scene. And so for about 4 hours a night, I would sit there with a dull razor blade and a blood pill, and I would run it across my arm every time a new group came in and fall into the bathtub. Like, and I sat there and unalived myself over and over again for 4 hours, so that in case there was a girl in the audience that was dealing with the same things, that she could see herself. It's one of my biggest regrets. I'm so ashamed that I did it because it's traumatizing. I mean, and
I
there's
can't
kids,
even imagine what that was like for you.
there are 4 and 5-year-olds walking. You know, I mean, maybe there were young kids. I remember seeing young kids, and I think back to
It's
that
literally
now.
like programming them.
Oh yeah. And at the end of the night, you go home and you just feel so disassociated because you have to sit and just disassociate, you know?
I mean, how else are you going to survive? Like literally the act of or theatrics of killing yourself. Like what a horrific.
Yeah. And why would you choose somebody that deals with that? You know, why not? Absolutely, you know, but
An
why would you do
actor.
it? Why would you do it in the first place? So we're
Right.
not dealing with a reason here. And, you know, the other scenes, and I'll leave it at this, the other scenes, they actually chose people who had dealt with those things too. And so they're reliving their worst nightmares over and over and over for 4 hours, you
It's
know?
almost like a
And
public
it's just really sad. And
shaming.
it breaks you 100%. You are a literal, like, that is when you start to not recognize yourself anymore. You're so tired. You're so like in the midst of, you're drained emotionally in every way. You are like, I am just in this, and it builds camaraderie because you're in the midst of this insanity with other people.
You're
And
trauma
so
bonding.
we're totally trauma bonding. We're a lot of us leaving our homes for the first time. You know, there's not a lot of time to talk to anybody. They really don't like for you to talk to a lot of the people from your past unless, you know, they're affiliated with the evangelical movement very
Jesus.
strongly. You're not allowed to date. You're not allowed to, I couldn't talk to boys my first year unless it was for like a practical school purpose. This is like, you shouldn't be talking to leadership for too long. You should not be talking to anybody that's also a first year unless you're in a track together and you have a question. So
Who were you allowed to talk to?
I mean, the girls in the program, and you know, I wasn't supposed to be on the phone with any boys unless it was like my brother or my father. And you know, it was really, and if you were caught, you got in trouble. And it was, I remember coming out of that year and thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know that I know how to talk to a guy anymore. And for the entire time that I was there, that was like, I think I was there
After your first, you mean after your first year there or after your first year out?
after my first year there, because
Okay.
your first year ends, it's kind of like a college year. It's like the same kind of timeline, sort of, like September to I think May or
Okay.
August. And so you leave and you can talk to boys again. But you're supposed to still be, you know, very careful about how you do it. You don't want to lead them on. You don't want to be provocative. You know, we had to wear shirts, tank tops under our shirts all the time so that we couldn't show any midriff, wear shorts over our bathing suits, tank tops over our bathing suits. Everything was about, we constantly were hearing about protecting our brothers in Christ, protecting them from molesting, protecting them from wanting us. Oh yeah, it was our job.
This is like the original, well, maybe she was asking for it. Like,
Yeah.
what the frick? That is Did you at any point were you feeling like this was off prior to talking to your friend? Or were you just because it sounds like it's so slow and methodical that first year where they chip away at it. And because if you showed up there, even in the state you were in, I would imagine most people, if it was just day one, you're not talking to boys, you're living with these people, you work for the church, you're going through the hell house, and it's all in one day. People be like, I don't know about this, but it's just so slow and methodical.
It's also the way they spin it. So here's the thing. Have you ever heard of like getting ahead of it? It's like a PR move. So one of the things that they do right in the beginning, one of the things they do right in the beginning is they do that. They get ahead of it. So they're like, this is going to seem extreme. And that's because you are going to make an extreme difference in the world. If you are going to make an extreme difference in the world, you are going to have to live by extreme guidelines in your life. You're going to have extreme self-control. You're going to have extreme levels of like obedience. You're going to have to, And so everything is about, if you want this, then you have to live in an extreme way. You have to live by extreme rules. You don't speak
It's
to
like dangling a carrot in front of you.
yeah, and they use crazy things. They're like, if you want to have a godly marriage and husband one day, then you are going to give this entire year to God, and you are going to not talk to men, and you are going to not, or talk to the opposite sex and all this kind of stuff. And then God is going to give you that healthy relationship that you wouldn't have had. And it's like, no, it's going to make me real awkward and come back later to bite me. And I'm still going to be single when I'm 38.
It's literally grooming. You hear grooming in the sense of like grooming children and all of that, but like it's literally training someone for a particular purpose or particular activity, and that's what they were doing for you. Like, this is going to be hard. It's going to be really hard, but you know what? You can only find happiness if you go through these trials, and it's just. It's awful to have so many people, and yourself included, obviously, go through that.
Yeah, it was nuts. I mean, and everything, again, I talked about like the camaraderie, the trauma bonding. So one of the first things they do is they put you in a family when you get there.
I wanted to get to that because this is the part that was my first, like, what the fuck?
Yeah, this was the part again. I was like, how was I not like, get out? But so it's like a week or two in, and they bring you into this small chapel. It's not a part of their church. I don't know if they rented it out or what, but at the front, so there's first year, second year, third years, and then staff. And these people are a year older than you. And so they have a guy, girl, guy, girl, guy, girl, guy, girl up at the front from the second year class. And you walk in, and they are like, we're going to essentially, I got sorted into my house like Hogwarts, but it's like your family. They call it your AC family for the year. And I went and met them. So I had like two other people that were first years with me, 2 or 3, and we were all in the same family unit. And the mother and father, and again,
did you have to call them mom and dad?
Thankfully, and I'm still friends with her today. Thankfully, I got one of the best people there who was like, this is bullshit. Like, she was just like, I'm giving it another shot. I can't believe I'm doing this. She was giving another shot, and then, she left. But she was one of the most like practical, reasonable people. And now we're friends to this day. She's like, God. Don't ever say my name about this. Don't ever mention it in front of any people. I am so ashamed. I get it.
I don't think, I get it, but like, I hope you don't feel ashamed or anything, because it's so easy. It's so easy if you have the knowledge to do it.
Yeah,
to control
absolutely. 100%. But she was really practical, and she's like, do not call me your mother. She's like, I'm not your mom. I'm a year older.
Thank God. It's like I'm like an older sister.
Yeah. But we were both kind of at this place where we were just searching for more. And so they had measured us early. It was like a part of orientation. The first day they had done your ring size. We had no clue what it was. And then you forget about it because you do like 40 things that day. And so we're there, and all of a sudden the parents get out these rings. I think they're ring boxes or something like that. And they put the ring on your finger, on your marriage finger. And they're like, this is for your year-long commitment to Christ, to not date anyone, to not, focus on anyone other than God this year. We're going to protect you. We're going to be like your family, all these different kinds of things. And you're sitting there like crying and praying. And it's, again, just that emotional pull of like, I have just left my family for the first time. I've left this small town I've, lived in my entire life. I am terrified just in general of like every single change. I'm exhausted beyond belief. And you are telling me that you are going to be my family and that I can lean on you. And it makes you so grateful. I was so grateful for this crazy thing.
And they've managed to convince you that your oppressor or your abuser, or it's called Stockholm Syndrome, you start to feel grateful for the minimal. Actually, I don't. That's not Stockholm Syndrome. I'm going to re-say that. Please cut that out. I cannot get canceled for mislabeling Stockholm Syndrome.
Actually, I think you're right. I think it is Stockholm Syndrome.
Well, it's when you start to feel sympathy for your abuser, but it is a little bit maybe like that. Just leave it in. Who
Yeah.
cares? So it
Yeah.
is a little bit like that. But then what they're doing is they're making it, and this is like narcissistic almost. They're making it be that we're the problem, but we're the solution. So I'm sorry you're having it really rough. So here's a support system, and that support system is in on it. It's like if again in a reality TV show where it's like, oh, we are so sorry you had a panic attack. Here's a producer, or here's a therapist that we employ and pay for. It's like, come on.
Yeah. No, it was, and it was always that. It was always this, I remember one of the years I was there for a long time, and I eventually, I don't know a better way to say it, like sort of rose up in the ranks. I don't know. I became, closer with the people who were in charge of everything. And, we were with, they ran the program essentially, and eventually started to run this huge church. And,
you started to run a church?
No, they did. So they were running the program at first, and then within a couple of years, they actually had been asked to take over the church. So they were then running the entire church. And so with that, one of the big things that happened, I was on support staff essentially. So I wasn't a student any longer, but I wasn't like a full-fledged staff member. And so they would pay me $75 a week, and I think they let me live in the apartment. So I made $75 a week or every 2 weeks. And, I remember I wasn't crazy close at this point with, she was one of the two leaders that were married. And she came up to me, and I was just really stressed, and I think I worked for her at the time. I maybe had been sick or something. And I was just like, groceries are going to be really hard this week. I just want to do this thing. And I just never had any money, like never had anything. And she bought me and came over out of the blue and brought me these groceries. And it was like some fresh fruits and vegetables and things like that. And I think it was out of kindness. I think she saw like she really needs food.
You were
but when I think about it, like I was like honestly struggling. I was like living off of hot dogs and ramen. And at this point, it's like I get people do that in college, but like, and you can live, but there was no reason I should be working 40 hours a week and making $75 every 2 weeks. There was no reason. It was free labor, and it's tax free and all this stuff.
Exactly
anyway,
what it was.
So
well, and then they can control you with, here's some groceries.
Absolutely. And then I walked into the apartment and I started crying, and I was like, she thought of me. I remember looking, and I was like, it's just so cool that like somebody at her, I remember saying this out loud. I was like, somebody at her level would think of me and bring me this stuff over. And I think back on that now, and I'm like, that is so fucked up. Pay me. I'm working constantly. Like I am, oh my God, it's just, you just become grateful for anything. You become so grateful for anything that anyone does for you. And you would never
basic human needs being met.
Yeah. And, it was just, I remember looking and saying that out loud, and you're just like, wow. And there were so many instances of that, of like this kindness that broke through how difficult it was. These moments of like thoughtfulness and all this kind of stuff. But by the end of it, I was just so brainwashed and so, I told you this, I went to India, and we did a trip, like a missions trip, and I kept a journal while I was there. I couldn't find the journal, but I read through it when I was moving into this apartment like 2 or 3 years ago, and I hadn't seen it for years. And I had fully gone through therapy at this point. I kind of knew a lot of the stuff that I had worked through, which I haven't even gone through any of that yet. Sorry. But I opened the journal and I started reading it, and honestly, it was gibberish. Like it looked like somebody hit like a weed pen that was too strong for them and then hit it again and waited 30 minutes and wrote down 6 pages. I mean, it sounded like a crazy person. It was like,
Oh,
thank you, God. I don't deserve this, God, to be here, God. I can't believe I'm in this place, serving you, doing these things for you, these people, all these kind of just like crazy things that I was like, what was I thinking? Who did I think I was, who did I think I was going to like, help, or what was I going to do? Like, and also like, what am I talking about? There's no element of any story or anything like that. It's just constantly talking to God, constantly saying how I'm not good enough, constantly saying how you're only through you, only by your hand, only, and you
it's
just start
abusive.
to realize how like broken down you are. You have no original thought. You can't even tell a story about something that's happening on this incredible trip. India was mind blowing. It was beautiful. The food was incredible. The people were incredible. The culture was amazing. I mean, it was once in a lifetime, and I'll be honest, I barely remember it. There are sections of the trip like I remember, but I think my brain just was weirdly wired. It was so just, all I could focus on was Jesus.
You had been reprogrammed.
Constantly. Yeah. Just, was God mad at me? Was God happy with me? Praying. There was this thing they told us to do, praying without ceasing. You should be praying in your head all day long, talking to God, running every decision by him. One of the first things they told us to do when we got there, they was like, I want you to write down everything you think about for 2 days. So we literally had notebooks, and every 10 minutes we would check in and write down our thoughts. Every 10 minutes, everything we were thinking about, because we were reading this book like about taking captive every thought that we have. And so you were constantly thinking about what you were thinking about. I mean, when I tell you, I was so
How did you
messed up
not
when
go
I got up.
completely, yeah, crazy? Like that's like anxiety on top of anxiety.
Yeah. I mean, you're constantly on, constantly anxious, constantly in your head. You're just so aware of every single thing you do. I would have a weird thought and be like, oh, I have a crush on that guy. Oh my God. And I would just spiral for 15 minutes. I'm not supposed to do that. My heart is not pure. I'm not, like, God has called me to be this, and I am thinking about this guy. What is wrong with me that I can't do this?
I just can't even imagine what that was
Yeah.
like. That's so awful.
Yeah.
So you have shared a lot of very alarming, very scary, very manipulative stories. Where I'm sure you have hundreds more, and happy to talk about those too. But was there a moment where you were like, I got to get out, or I'm at rock bottom? Because you're at this point where you're being grateful for having your basic human needs met by your
Yeah.
oppressor, by your abuser, by your leaders. And
Mm-hmm.
you're grateful for it. Or you're having a crush on a boy, which is a total normal thing for anybody at any age to do, let alone someone who's in their 20s or their late teens or 20s. What
Yeah.
was that moment where you were just like, I'm broken, or I got to get out, or this is not right?
Yeah. Towards the end, I think the catalyst and like the big moment was obviously that email from my friend and reading that blog. But the big one was, and I think this one was the one where I was like, I can't look at myself in the mirror anymore, and I have got to figure out why. Somebody I loved very much was put through conversion therapy, and that's the one that's like really hard to talk about, because you just love them, and
Well,
they
you
come back
don't
and
have
they
to talk
tell
about
you.
it too.
Yep, no, it's fine. It's just, you think about them and their face and like all that stuff. And they would come back and tell me kind of the stuff that they were talking about. And this was one of 2 people that ended up getting sent. One of them was a really close friend who was at a different program in a different state that was started by people who went to my program. And they put them through conversion therapy because they were not straight, and they were coming back and telling me these things. And it was somebody that I dated while I was there. And I knew, and it's very complicated, and I know that sounds insane, but I just loved them, and I knew there wasn't anything wrong with them, and I had struggled really hard, with that for a long time because the church was very adamantly against LGBTQ lifestyle, and I wasn't. I didn't see anything wrong with it, except for the fact that they said God said it was an abomination, and they were for sure going to hell, but they treated it differently. And this person would tell me kind of the things that they were going through and hearing and all of this kind of stuff, and the way they were ostracized, when people found out. And I just couldn't deal with it. I was like, I have got to figure out what I am doing right now, because I am on the wrong side of this and I don't know how to leave. I don't know where to go. Like, there is nowhere for me to go. I don't have any friends, at home anymore. My parents live in different states now. They have their own lives. I don't have any friends. I don't have a friend that's not here in this program. I am isolated, and I love this person, and they are just going through hell. And this is wrong. This has got to be wrong. This cannot be right. They cannot be changed. I certainly don't believe they should marry me and go through the rest of their life not fulfilled. And, I couldn't say that out loud to anyone, because that would have maybe been my ticket home in the first place. I don't know. But I was terrified to tell anybody. And so I just sat with it. And it grew enough that I started to question other things, and left eventually when I found a way to do it.
Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of Eyes Wide Open. If you enjoy the show, the best way to support us is by sharing or dropping a review. For more information and content, check out engagewithnick.com or find me on Instagram at nthompson513. Don't go through life blind. Do the work so you can show up in the world with your eyes wide open.